programs. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. And I think it's a great culmination as I finish my second month into retirement and try and figure out what my what's next is. And so I'm delighted to be here and back with some fellow CIOs and other folks that are managing IT in what is a historical time for this entire globe. So before I begin with my remarks, I want to open with a video. And what this video is going to do, let me do a little bit of a pre-opening for this one. In this video, part of what we did at NASA to prepare for what you're about to see happened during the pandemic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about another amazing activity that will happen in July that is also going on during the pandemic. So just give me a second here while I share my screen and get ready to play the video. And I did practice this, so it should go well. I am sharing my screen here. And
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
America has launched. So rises a new era of American spaceflight, and with it the ambitions of a new generation continuing the dream. 20 seconds into flight, stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Plus 30 seconds into this historic mission. Flying crew on board Dragon and Falcon 9, and look at them go.
Falcon power telemetry nominal.
M1D throttle down.
We're throttling down to get ready for the period of maximum dynamic pressure. We're in the throttle bucket. Reports say all systems are go.
Sorry.
Vehicle is supersonic.
We've exceeded Mach 1 on the Falcon 9.
M1D throttle up.
We're throttling back up to full power as we're through max Q.
Copy 1 Bravo.
Great. So exit full screen. All right, this is the part that takes me a little bit longer to get back here to everybody. I need to stop sharing my screen, which now looks different. All right, sorry about this, guys. We practiced yesterday and it went really well, and now I'm struggling a little bit. It's hard to believe that I did IT, isn't it? Let's see, go back to Zoom, this, and now everything has changed. Nope. All right, let me just see what we can do. New share. No, I don't want to share anymore. And great. Let me go back. Sorry about this. Everything worked yesterday, and now it is actually, the screen looks different than practicing. And
I'm gonna stop your sharing for you.
Okay, thank you.
You should be back.
I am back. Thank you very much. I could not find the buttons. They weren't set up the same way as we practiced. So sorry about that, guys. We did practice, and when I figured that was probably going to happen, but that's IT for you. So I hope you enjoyed watching that historic moment that was brought to you, yes, during the pandemic. NASA had started tracking the pandemic because we do global IT operations. And yes, I did come from running IT, global IT operations, and I am one of those CIOs that can say that I do operate IT off the planet. NASA, my team in particular, put onto the International Space Station September of 2019, Office 365. And so they get the teams and all of that, just like you, if you use the Microsoft products, just like I did back when I was with NASA, and do that. NASA likes to dream big and make science fiction turn into fact on it every single day. So back to the preparation during the pandemic. So we started back in February, and we knew this launch was historic. And the reason NASA at first thought it was historic is it would be the return of human launches back to the United States, which would be the first time in approximately 9 years. The second thing about this is actually a commercial operations. This is where NASA paid SpaceX to carry not just cargo, but humans back and forth to space station. So I'm looking forward to the landing, having been involved in many of the meetings with regard to a safe approach as well as a safe return. It will be a water return with parachutes, and there were a lot of interesting challenges associated with this entire effort that took years in the making, but we are so delighted to bring the success associated with it. But that wasn't the only thing that NASA has been preparing for when the pandemic started. So years ago, it was imagined that NASA with its partners would put another vehicle on Mars. The United States is the only country that has ever landed safely on Mars. Many countries have tried, and we are headed to put a new vehicle. The launch will be July 20th, the Mars 2020 vehicle called Perseverance. And that will, so hopefully you'll stay tuned and watch that launch. And again, the preparations for this final stages of the launch happened during the pandemic and are still happening right now. Fortunately, NASA has a fleet of airplanes. The first A in NASA is aeronautics. And we were able to use the airplane to safely move the scientists and engineers and others associated with the Mars Perseverance launch back and forth from its launch facility so that they could begin all the preparations and load the vehicle into the hold in order for the launch to happen on July 20th. The landing isn't expected until February, mid-February timeframe in 2021. And the last few minutes of that is called the 7 minutes of terror when landing on Mars because of the different atmosphere that Mars had. What's different about the Mars 2020 vehicle is it has a helicopter on it, a little tiny little helicopter called Ingenuity, and it is tucked up underneath the vehicle. Right now, the hope is that they'll be able to launch 3 to 4 missions for this helicopter on Mars. But as I said, let me stress the word hope, because we're not quite sure it's going to work. We can do all the science, all the modeling, everything, the speculations, the calculations, and everything. But after a launch and a landing, and all that happens with that, because space is actually a very dangerous place to be, not just the elements anymore, but there are significant cybersecurity threats in space right now. But anyway, it could jostle enough of the helicopter that it might not take off. So hope is there that it would work. And if it gets working, the plan is 3 to 4 operations with that one. So when one thinks big and one imagines big things, they can actually really happen when you pull amazing teams together. And I'm going to turn to each of you as IT leaders, and it was probably pretty big, pretty fast pivot for each of you. It was for me and my team at NASA, and it went really well and very, very smoothly because about 4 years ago, the CIO was given control of the entire network. Prior to that time frame, the way networks were managed is whoever built it and whoever funded it is the one that managed it. So it was a good thing that we did that, because in the 4 years before the pandemic hit, we worked very hard to operate the network with greater efficiencies and bring to life actually a couple of move from 42 VPNs down to just a handful of VPNs used by NASA. And because we did that, then on day one, we successfully had about 50,000 people on our network. And they were able to work really well, except for the last mile, which we all have to worry about, and that's the home networks associated with that. And then we worked very hard to make sure that everybody that didn't have a very good network at their house worked really hard to put into place some interim operations so they could keep working, because we knew this was going to be for the long haul. So like you, for a very, very short time, the CIO was applauded, the hero, instead of the usual goat associated with the policies that we have to put into place, as well as protect the entire enterprise from the risks associated with improperly managed IT or from nation states that are attacking the network. being from the United States government, our biggest threat is usually from nation states, although there are certainly some very talented groups out there that do like to make a point, fun, fame, and fortune by getting onto NASA's network. But largely the big issue is the nation states associated with that. So it was very exciting to be part of that and to watch that we could have our launch safely. The astronauts went into quarantine a little bit sooner than they would have ordinarily in order to make that happen and not be a replay of Apollo 13. The 50th anniversary of Apollo 13 was celebrated this past April, and NASA did hold a few movie nights and streamed it over the network, including closed caption, going to the cloud operations for closed caption to allow our employees to enjoy on April 30th, the 50th anniversary of Apollo 13 by watching the movie. And again, being re-inspired by looking at everything as really every challenge is really an opportunity. And that's kind of what this whole pandemic has been about, is just looking this and using this moment to get stuff done. I probably, like you, I had a list of projects. I was like, really, we're moving this fast? And even in my last 2 months, slid in several projects that were both protective and customer experience oriented to get that implemented before I decided to say farewell to 30 years of federal government service. So it was exciting. It's the world's best job. It's probably just like your jobs. It's also very tiring, which is why I decided to take a bow out from a great job and watch from the sidelines the launches. And I'm looking forward to the July 20th launch. I'm actually hoping to be able to go to the July 20th launch, but we'll see if that can really happen. But you guys tuned in to talk about digital transformation, and this historic period. So boy, what did that mean? What does that mean for you? And what did it mean for me? When my deputy, who took over as acting as the CIO, he and I spent many an evening kind of talking about what we needed to get done during this time period and really thinking through what we needed to deliver differently when we got to the other side of this pandemic, using this opportunity to do a lot of learning and about delivering IT in this operation, and most importantly, really learning about our team and how they operate in a much more isolated manner. How do projects work in that? So we really focused on self-care first for all the executives that reported to us, and then asked them on a regular basis to take care of their teams. And in doing that, we would then overlay the progress of the projects and modify some of these projects to be delivered in a way that was a little bit more oriented to our digital transformation goals. And so as I left, I was the co-lead for digital transformation for the entire enterprise of NASA, and the co-lead is with a couple of folks on the mission side, so that we could enable the IT piece with the business processes associated with the benefits that they would get. One of the things that was really hard that we had to deal with is identity management. The NASA works with everyone across the entire globe. And when you can't physically see somebody, it is hard to identify them and then give them permissions into your network. And that includes scientists in some of the countries that might have a few more nation state actors in them as well. So we were working really hard at laying out our strategy to be able to bring to life the Moon to Mars missions with global identity access management to the specific pieces they needed to do. So that work was well underway during the pandemic, and I'm very excited to learn with the few folks I keep in touch with. They're continuing to make the progress that is necessary, because it is through partnership and collaboration across the entire globe that great things actually do happen. And that's what NASA is all about, is people first, and then international collaborations in order to turn science fiction into fact. That made my job both exciting as well as very challenging, because I talked about a little bit about the identity management. This was also an opportunity in the digital transformation process for people to really rethink that they were kind of holding on to some older practices at NASA because of our history. lives have been lost in the pursuit of human space exploration. And that is at the forefront of everything we do. So changing processes, you really have to examine the change. Is it for the sake of change, or is it for a change that benefits and continues to keep humans safe when they are doing their jobs, whether it's an astronaut to somebody building the rockets, or simply me? I would go in and out of an office on a regular basis, and safety was definitely paramount to us coming in and out of the office every single day to do that. And that is a huge piece of the NASA culture. But anyway, folks then started to say, wow, I'm struggling to work on XYZ. And we weren't letting, in many of our centers located across the United States, many of them were not permitted to come onto the center or onto the base, as largely many of them are a base, and to do their work. So we really had to then work with our partners to begin even a more accelerated version of NASA's digital transformation. Now, I stepped off the train, so to speak, around that time, but I do know folks were really starting to question their practices and figuring out how they could make that digital transformation. This digital transformation would include the engineering tools associated with all of the flying assets that are made. And from my perspective, what my team had to deal with was from the network all the way up the stack through data exchanges, and how we could enable that in a secure manner as well as in a safe manner, and ensure the integrity of the engineering that was going on associated with that. So I was disappointed to be leaving NASA. I was very excited to be doing this kind of work. But I am also very excited to be at home and feel a little bit more rested, and to be pondering my what's next here as the former NASA CIO. So I had committed to being able to allow for times for question and answer. I could keep going on and telling you stories about the IT and where it is. It's on airplanes, and yes, my team works on that stuff. I've been to launch, I've traveled the world, making sure that our IT operations really supported the mission for the benefit of humankind. And so with that, I will turn it over to questions for a little while. And if we don't get any questions, then I'll probably close out with another story. So Kara, I'll turn it over to you to help me out with questions, because I'm going to have to set up my screen here a little bit.
Sure. So if you do have a question, you can head on over to the event portal, and that chat box, you'll be able to ask any questions to Renee. But in the meantime, we do have one question. So how do you think that remote work is going to impact tech fluency? Negatively, positively? What's your opinion on this?
Wow, hadn't anticipated that question. So tech fluency, I think, is actually going to increase, and it has to. Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a couple of stories on that one. And one is it kind of has to. At the office, everybody was accustomed to calling a technician to come in and fix sometimes rather simple things. Users do some amazing things sometime in what I call an ignosecond. An ignosecond is defined by that moment when your car door closes and you hear the click, and you look, and inside the car is the key fob or the keys, and you now know that you can't get from outside inside your car. So a lot of things happen with computers in ignoseconds. Well, technicians, even though they could come into the computer, if the individual couldn't even get it to an area where we could use a bomb guard tool to get into the computer, there was a lot of talking and a lot of helping of what does your screen look like, point here, point there, and that, yes, this does happen at NASA with the really smart people that work there. And the story I have to amplify that is my father is in his 80s. And right at the beginning of all of this, he had a dizzy spell and had to lay down outside. And this was in March, and it's still a little chilly in the Washington, D.C. area. Laid down in the garden, yes, right next to the garden gnome. He really does have a garden gnome. And had to lay down because he felt like he was going to faint. And a neighbor came along and got him up and got him off to the hospital. And so off he went. It was just a spell. It was his heart medicine. He's fine. Well, I live far from him, not really far, but 45 minutes. And during traffic, he might as well live in a completely other part of the United States, because in traffic, I'm never going to get there quickly. So I bought him an Apple Watch. Now, my dad is a really smart metallurgist. Metals go into space. You have to know how it reacts. Didn't make sense when I was growing up, made a lot more sense when I got to NASA. So we got him the Apple Watch, and I went over to his house and I helped him set it up. No sooner the next day he's on the phone, he's like, the watch face disappeared. So here I was. I'm not an Apple user. I am looking at the computer, talking to my dad, whose computer is so old that he can't use Zoom or FaceTime on it. And I'm trying to blindly lead him through resetting up his Apple Watch. And we proceeded to have this kind of conversation 3 or 4 more times until he came over to the house recently. We got him set up, gave him a tutorial, and I'm now not providing tech support on his Apple Watch, but it'll be here on Thursday. So I'm going to set aside some time to do that tech support. So there's an example. Guy well into his 80s, really smart, PhD, knows all about metals and their reaction in space. And here I was blindly leading him on how to set up his Apple Watch, something I don't have and something I didn't know much about, but it worked pretty well. And so he is now a little bit more tech proficient, and he's like, okay, I need to get a new computer and I need you to come set it up and teach me how to use things. So you can teach an old dog new tricks. And this is what's happening all over the place, which is making for some great conversations in families as the younger generation is helping the older generations, and sometimes vice versa. And the exchanges are now over the types of apps that people are using to stay safe and still find comfort in their family. So I'm a big believer that we're going to make even more advancements, and you're going to have both dangerously and positively, people are going to be a lot more tech savvy whenever we go back to going back into the office, for those that will resume going back to the office.
Great. So another question is coming from Jean Pascal from Deutsche Bank.
Mhm.
What is a typical IT program for a CIO at NASA?
Oh, a typical program. Oh my gosh. I would actually have to say, well, we have sort of the typical stuff. Let me start there. So we've got app dev, and that was a growing area. We've got lifecycle management. We've modified the NASA. One of the first things that I was able to do at NASA is work with the enterprise risk management for NASA, which is a pretty significant footprint, because every launch, satellite or humans, is very risky. And so we changed the risk model to include IT and all of the enterprise risk model, management swim lanes. And when we did that, it started to illuminate that our IT programs needed to be better organized. That's one of the transformations that I was able to do at NASA. And we settled on 6 programs. And right now NASA is going through and rethinking to see if we need to subdivide some of these 6 programs differently. So let's see if I can remember them. So cybersecurity is its own swim lane, because you need to have a partition between operations and cybersecurity, much like the Constitution divides the United States up into three different areas: administrative, executive, and judicial. And that's where you have the separation. We've got end user support, which are the devices associated with that. We have compute, which is where our cloud is happening, data centers, and we have a lot of high-end computing, to bi-coastal high-end computing. So that's in there. Cybersecurity, that applications management, which is also where our software management is housed. Then we've got, yikes, I knew I was going to forget this when we go there would be 2 more apps, the 3 there. Oh, end user. Oh, communications. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot that one. The communications, which is the entire global and off the globe communications for NASA, which is also our posts that bring down data from space in order to deliver it across the globe. There was a 6th program. I now have retirement brain and I can't think of it. Those are our 6 programs, like most. Well, they would be if I remembered it. Those are the programs that NASA operated. And then we had a lot of partnerships with the business that would be unique situations that we would have to deal with. And that's where NASA would be a little bit differently when it came to IT management. So sorry, Kara, I forgot the sixth one. If I think of it, I'll get it. I'm picturing the organization and I'm trying to walk through that right now. Go ahead.
Great. So we do have time for one more question. This is from Thomas at Arconic. He is asking, did you find that the pandemic changed the approach to the digital transformation, or did it accelerate it?
It changed the approach, and what it was the accelerant. There was, we had spent the last year or so studying digital transformation and trying to identify the first critical or foundational steps that would be necessary for NASA to begin its digital or continue its digital transformation. Pockets of missions we're already doing digital transformation, but we needed to do it in its entirety as an agency. It identified, like I said, the foundational pieces, which is identity and access management. Those were huge pieces. Rethinking our network management, which we were headed towards a software-defined network, and we had a piece already from a pilot program or an early adoption program, and we were building on that stack, Zero Trust. So what happened is our partners understood more of the importance of the identity access management and going to a software-defined network and building on a Zero Trust stack. They understood that better, so that from the business side, they were beginning to now say, okay, let's look at our engineering tools that would work for us, and thinking through international partners with those engineering tools. And so when I left, the beginning of it was beginning some identification of early adoption of engineering tools that could be used internal and external to the agency in a secure manner. And that was not on the roadmap for several months, and it moved forward quite a bit because we really needed to do this faster in order to support the Moon to Mars mission, which is called the Artemis program, named after Apollo's twin sister. Because that program, the Moon 2024, is to put the first American female on the moon and put another man back on the moon. So accelerate, accelerate, accelerate. You guys know this, never let a great crisis go to waste. I never did. And I was just really excited to see how things were turning really, really fast, when in the federal government, things don't move that quickly.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Renee. We are just about out of time. If you have any other questions, we have a chat forum. We have, like I said, networking opportunities. I'm sure Renee will be back in this event portal to answer any questions. We do have another session coming up, so thank you all for joining the opening keynote. Please leave your survey feedback forms, and we will see you in the next session. Thanks so much, Renee.
Great, thank you very much, and sorry about that sixth program. I will put that in the chat field as soon as I think of it. All the best to the rest of your event. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.